Reflecting at this point, I see obvious traits of gender variance throughout my childhood. Going to a mixed primary and all-boys secondary school, I was always kind of an awkward misfit throughout, and all throughout my life I would dress or experiment with makeup privately when I had time alone, when family was out, always anxiously checking through the curtains for them in case they arrived home unexpectedly. In essence, shame-filled behaviour, as though what I felt and was doing was wrong or odd. We got internet at home when I was 12, and when I discovered that being transgender was a thing and that trans people shared their experiences on YouTube, I read as much information and watched as many videos as I could without understanding for 18 years what exactly I identified with so much. I discovered awesome people's transition timelines who still inspire me today. People like Isley Roos, Jacqueline Fiore, Maya Henry, Kayla Ward, Laura Jane Grace, and so many more. The internet opened my eyes to diversity that sheltered suburbia never could have. In media, I felt I identified with stories that had to do with gender variance, and that would have been my earliest exposure to anything close to being transgender, TV and movies. Imagining a life and sense of gender pleasure vicariously through the women I would see on screen. Gender pleasure can describe a sense of feeling good and comfortable in your own gender. It's a term that I first heard the American author and counselling psychologist Lucy Fielding using during a seminar last summer, and I've continued to use it since then. As I grow up, I fluctuated between thoughts of gender variance and heteronormative life navigation, having relationships with women and finding friends that were cisgender and heterosexual. In suburbia, there is little variance from the status quo, and the message that I took from this lack of exposure to anything other than Catholic, Irish, heteronormative timelines of life was that being anything other than a conformist was wrong. Then, the year I turned 30, I lost my grandma, who was a huge part of my life. I realised that I was transgender, and I started to slowly transition with hormones after beginning the coming out process, starting with my therapist and an aunt. This ring was a 30th birthday present from my mom, and those memories are attached to it still. After 30 years, journaling late one night in bed, after yet another breakup, my mind started to tick over, churning things through itself. Then suddenly, the disjointed string of planets aligned. 30 years of identifying with a gender other than the one I was assigned before birth suddenly made perfect sense. I remember the pause, putting the pen and journal down on the blankets, staring into space, thinking, oh my God, that's it. In the same way that you can't encapsulate an entire nuanced person in a movie or book, my coming out process was vast and varied, but there were some key points that stand as milestones to me. But first, if you enjoy this video and would like to help this channel to grow, you can sign up on Patreon and pledge a small monthly contribution to support my work. It's quick and easy and really helps creators like me to keep producing videos you enjoy. Now, straight back to it. In February 2022, after coming out to my therapist and discussing what to do next, I decided on a low-risk first step by arranging to meet and tell two very distant friends my news. Having met and told both of them, they ghosted me. Every time I disclose, I get nervous and my mind races, but I get to a cliff edge and belly flop into telling whoever it is. Next, in a cafe, I told an aunt I'm very close to, and she got emotional and sat in on the couch beside me and hugged me, saying how proud she was of me. In retrospect, she said that my eye contact was so improved that my confidence was palpable in that way, without a clue as to why I seemed so different until I told her. Then she suggested telling her younger daughter, my cousin, who was au fait with the LGBTQIA2S+ community to a good degree. I met her in another cafe and showed her a long tell-all letter I had planned to post into the cousins WhatsApp group we were all on, which I didn't in the end. I left her with my phone to read the note file I'd written the letter on, as I went downstairs to get a cup of water. When I returned, I asked if it made sense, and she apologised, saying, "Sorry, I'm crying here." I'll never forget that. Soon after, she took me shopping for makeup, bras and dresses, which I loved too. It broke the ice for me around shopping in person. Around the time I told my aunt, I told my mom. She wasn't familiar with much to do with transgender community, and I tried to explain and suggest resources to her that could explain and answer her in better ways than I could on the spot. I came out to her at 3 a.m. after she'd hosted a dinner party for 2 other couples, and I had finished work at 10:30, so I joined them for food. During the whole dining period, my mind was blank, numb in the knowledge that I had this huge thing to share inside me, but was terrified of the reactions I might get. On the couch, after the guests had left, we watched some crap and drank tea until I paused the show and felt my heart racing, turning to her right up to the point where I said the mangled sentence that gradually became, "I'm transgender." I told her I needed to tell my brother too, but wanted to do it face to face because he was living a long way from us. Through intervening phone chats, I veered away from his questions about how I was until finally, after 6 months, I got a chance to travel to him one weekend with Mom on a flying visit. I had to travel back home the next morning, but I couldn't put off telling him any longer. It was agony. So over a pint in a hotel, I told him, then we chatted. Mom reassured him that he wasn't losing me, and he seemed totally accepting. Then, after those months of waiting and the adrenaline and release of having finally let it out, my system just crashed, and I went to the room before them, put Netflix on my phone, and fell asleep before the title sequence of Kath and Kim had ended. Then, after working the following day, Mom called me and said the air had changed between her and my brother today. They both had been talking a lot about what I had disclosed, I think, and had become confused and emotional about the whole thing, which made me feel awful for having disclosed any of it. But when I talked about it with the first aunt I had come out to, she talked sense into them, and they turned a corner after that, which improved how I felt, my relationship with them, and it alleviated the guilt I felt for having upset them by disclosing the truth about who I really was and would now be becoming more holy. There are other parts of the story, overall hugely loving and positive, but the points I've already mentioned are some milestone moments from my early steps into this journey, and I'd rather keep those more personal ones private for now. It is hard to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it, but I love the David Bowie lyric, "The moment you know, you know, you know." Something inside you just knows the truth when you hit it. There is a thread of intergenerational conservative religiosity in my wider family, and no one has so far identified as any part of the LGBTQIA2S plus community apart from me. So the idea of coming out to them terrified me because of this thread and other stories I'd heard online about families being ripped apart. But the love and support and acceptance I received was unbelievable. The complete opposite to the catastrophic implosion I was anticipating if it all went wrong. But one thing was definite. I wasn't prepared to deny who I was any longer, even at the risk of losing people I loved. I prefer to think of coming out as my choosing to let people in. Thanks, Grandma from Queer Eye. Presenting as myself to the world in my full gender expression is my next hurdle, and I'm anxious about that. Will I pass? All those questions. But it's not a question of if I will do this, but when. I realise that many of you still struggle with coming out and the fear of losing people, but would it be better to stay silent and hide who you truly are, or let people into your story, giving them the choice to stay or go? We are born to a biological family, but that doesn't mean they will be necessarily good for you. But reaching out and making contact with others in similar situations can help you. You may find that the friends you make can become your family. The fear of being vulnerable and coming out and the potential risk of pain through losing people is real. But hiding your true self so you don't upset others is excruciating too. It's your choice to make, and not coming out for whatever reason is no reflection on you. Some can't, and that's a separate issue. But if you can, and are able to access supports that can help you, I would encourage you to consider the improvements that this very brave action could bring to your internal and external worlds. Opening up and being real, allowing yourself to be vulnerable in any way, is like spreading your arms apart and exposing the soft core of yourself to either potential stabbing pain at the hands of unsavoury characters that only seek to hurt you, or to loving acceptance that pushes you on with the wind and words of all the voices of all those people who support you at your back. I wish for my coming out story to show you that for all the horrific stories of damage and division, there are positive stories too. Your future is being written by your actions and choices right now. What will happen in the next chapter? I'd love to know. Thanks for watching.